Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you to those of you who are watching this online right now. Welcome to the first ever Thursday midday workshop here at 3D Wellness. My name is Drew Detzner. I'm the owner of 3D Wellness. I'm also one of the clinicians here. I want to give you a brief overview of how these Thursday midday workshops are going to go, and then we'll jump into today's presentation, which is digestion, north to south. Like I said, my name is Drew Detzner. I'm the founder and the owner of 3D Wellness. My goal here is to help people heal safely and naturally from all sorts of different health challenges. Many of you are clients of mine, so you already know me. I like people to get healthier without feeling like they are restricted, without feeling unnecessarily challenged. A little bit of challenge is good for you. But what we really want is that people get healthier safely and naturally. Now, this is a Thursday midday workshop. It's the first one we're ever doing here. The way that these go is different from our other workshops because there is a planned presentation. If you've seen our Wednesday weekly workshops, either on Instagram or on YouTube, or if you've been here in person, then you know that that's an Ask Drew Anything. That whatever question is coming to mind for you, whatever topic is hot for you that week, you can ask it and get some info about it. With these Thursday midday workshops, what I'm after is there's a topic I feel is very important for you to know more about. So I put together a presentation about it and I share that with you. Typically, it'll be 30 to 45 minutes of presenting, followed with time for questions and answers. Now, those of you who are just online with us, again, thank you for being here. I don't have anybody monitoring the chat right now. So if you ask a question, it's not going to get answered until the end of the workshop. But I will check the chat before it's the end of the day. The rest of you know the rules. You get my attention, you either say my name or raise your hand, ask your question. Okay? So thank you for being here. Let's jump into it. When I came up with the idea for this presentation, I have to give a big shout out to one of my teachers. Her name is Kim. She would always say digestion is a north to south process. And before we got to the section in school where we actually covered digestion, we heard Kim say that a lot. North to south, north to south, north to south. It's like, all right, I get it. North to south. But as we learned more about digestion, what Kim shared with us was that if things take place in a certain order in our body, chemically, hormonally, then it's going to set us up for success further down in the digestive tract. So it's not just that the food happens to go from your mouth to your bottom. It's that what your body needs to do to make sure that is a successful process also has to happen top to bottom, very specific order with certain events taking place. Now, I could probably lecture to you for hours on all the hormonal and chemical things that have to take place with digestion. What I decided to do instead in the handout and up here on the board is keep it as simple as I can while still providing you with the info that you need to better understand digestion from north to south. If you have specific questions about different parts of the body, feel free to ask those. But otherwise, I want to give you a good overview of what's going on when it comes to digestion from north to south. So the first one is brain. And this is often overlooked by people. When we talk about digestive health, when we talk about what we can do to support better digestive health, what does our body need so that our gut isn't leaky? Or what do we need so we don't have heartburn? What is often overlooked is the first step. And if you've ever assembled something from IKEA, if you miss the first step, you're going to miss more steps. So, eyes, ears, and nose. What does that mean? That means we should be around the food while it's being prepared. We should be able to hear the food sizzling in the frying pan or in the oven. We should hear the familiar sounds of cooking, the wooden spoon against the pot, the sound of the refrigerator door or the pantry door opening and closing again and again and again. We want to hear those things. That's one of the signals to our brain that says, hey, guess what? Food is coming soon. We should get everything ready. When it comes to our eyes, when we see the food, it affects us. When that plate comes out, if you've been at a restaurant and you've seen your server carrying out your table's food, you know something is happening to your body when you see, oh, yeah, that's our food. We want to see that food because that's another way our brain can get that signal. Hey, food's on the way. Fire everything else up. And last but not least, nose. We want to smell the food. Now, it's best if we can smell it while it's cooking, while it's changing because of the heat that's being applied to it or the salt that's being added to it. We want to be around that. That's another way that we can signal to our brain that something big is about to happen here. We're going to have food coming through. Let's get everything ready for it. So I wrote down ignition because our brain is what starts this whole thing. It's the ignition system. When the brain is prepared for food, it can help everything else that is on this list get prepared for food. And then, of course, the opposite is if the brain is not prepared for food, then it's very unlikely that we will have optimal digestion because the body will not have received signals, that ignition switch, like, hey, food's coming, pep it up, wake it up, we got food coming to us. That makes sense? All right, good. So we want to support it. One of the most important ways we can support this supplementally is with a supplement that is called parotid PMG. Really important supplement. It nourishes the parotid saliva glands that are in our cheeks here. The saliva that the parotid glands makes, we're going to talk about it more when we get to mouth, but it's really important for mouth health, not just dental health. I'm not just talking about your teeth and gums. I'm talking about the mouth in its entirety and the health of our tongue also. We want to make sure that we are nourishing that because that's going to be a big part of how we get those signals to the brain. When we're breathing in, the flavors should be coming over the tongue. We should be picking up some degree of, oh, there's food nearby. I should probably get ready to digest it. The other big thing for brain when it comes to digestion is nourishing the pituitary gland. We use a supplement called pituitrophin PMG for that. The pituitary gland in the brain has a lot of jobs. One of its jobs is to make sure that your body is producing stomach acid. It sends out that signal. Hey, stomach, start to make your product. It should do that after it gets those signals about, oh, I hear food being cooked, I smell food being cooked, I see food, that kind of thing. If your pituitary isn't responding to those signals, we should nourish it up so that we can get an ideal response and set off that ignition. So that's the brain part. Now, I'm always curious with people, do you feel like you are around the majority of the food that you eat while it's being cooked? No? Yeah, okay. It's interesting to me. A lot of people are, some people aren't. I'm not going to shame anybody either way. What I've heard again and again from clients who don't spend a lot of time around the food they're going to eat while it's being prepared is that once they become aware of that, once we have this conversation and they spend time around food while it's being cooked, they notice the difference. They say like, hey, you know what? I felt better after the meal. I didn't get drowsy after the meal. I didn't feel bloated after the meal. Very interesting stuff. So that's the brain part of digestion, north to south. Brain first comes before mouth. Now, mouth I kind of hinted at. I want to go more in depth. Teeth, tongue, and saliva. So the mouth is equipped with a number of different aspects, or we could even call them tools, to help us digest our food. It is the only part of the human body where you are supposed to see bone. Think about that. There's no other spot on the human body where bone is exposed to the exterior world. Very interesting part of the body. The gentleman who started Standard Process went to Marquette University to the dental school and graduated. That's why we call him Dr. Royally. And he wrote quite extensively about the mouth because it has so many different tissues involved in it and it was the only spot where you could see bone, so it could give us some inkling into what's going on with the overall health of the person. When it comes to teeth, we want to make sure that they are nice and strong, not just the white pearly part, but all the way down to the roots and how they anchor into the gum tissue. It's going to compromise our ability to chew our food if our teeth are unwell. Again, including the tops that we see and that we brush, all the way down to the roots that anchor in nice and deep. The tongue. I mentioned that the tongue needs to be well for us to pick up all the flavors of our foods. The tongue, I'm going to include the tissue that's right under it. There's saliva that comes from under our tongue that helps us digest the food. And if our food does not interact with that saliva long enough before it is swallowed, then that food is not going to be digested optimally. So I'm sure in your lifetime you've heard people say, oh, make sure you chew your food really well. Make sure you chew your food more. You got to chew your food more. It's really not a manners thing. That would be chewing with your mouth closed. Different. Still important. This is, we want the food to interact with that saliva so that the saliva can start the process of breaking apart the food, which makes it easier on all the steps that we're going to talk about as we move forward to do their jobs. And that's saliva. A couple of different parts. The saliva can help us digest carbohydrates, can help us digest fats. It's really important, so we want to give that food plenty of time in our mouth. Another big role of saliva, and this is why I talk to people about not having a dry mouth or a cotton mouth, is that the saliva is really important to help get the food rolling down into our stomach. We want to make sure that food is very well lubricated so it's really easy to get down to our stomach. The times when I hear people say they have trouble swallowing supplements, that they feel like they get stuck, they're usually doing it in a rush. They're usually not noticing if their mouth is in a good place in terms of saliva production to swallow pills. If we take pause before we take our supplements, check in with our mouth, what's going on with our saliva. Sometimes you need a sip of water and kind of swish it around. And then if you take the supplements, you're like, oh, those are really easy to take. They wash right down. If we're a nervous pill taker, usually that'll kind of clamp up our saliva production and it won't allow us to swallow as easily as we could just because of the topic of the saliva not being there to provide lubrication. So we really want to make sure that our mouth is producing high quality saliva and plenty of quantity on saliva. So for teeth, there's a couple of supplements I really love. One of them is called Biodent. Another one is called Biost. I really like a supplement that is called Cataplex C, which is a whole food vitamin C, but works wonders for your teeth, your gums, all of it. When we talk about tongue, I mentioned the parotid PMG. That would be another one that we would want to use here. And if you are having trouble with saliva production in your mouth, if you regularly have dry mouth or cotton mouth for whatever reason, then we want to use a supplement that is called choline. Now, it's a B vitamin. It's nothing crazy. It's really good for your brain and your liver also. But if you take a choline tablet, you pop it in your mouth and you let it stay there, you're going to start to salivate within just a few seconds. It's a pretty incredible response. I use this with a lot of my clients who are going through chemotherapy or radiation treatments, and it's affecting their saliva production. They can actually start to taste food again or smell food better. They feel like they have an easier time eating when we add this as a pop it and let it dissolve in your mouth supplement, especially before meals start up. So there's a lot of different supplements here that are listed. You might be wondering, how would I know which one to use? I would suggest a consult with me. I would suggest at least calling in and talking to me and getting an idea. You can read the descriptions of the supplements on the Standard Process website. It'll give you good info, but it's different when you have somebody who's been working with these supplements for more than 15 years, asking questions, getting info, having an exchange with them to determine what would be best for you as an individual. There you go. That's mouth. Now, as we travel further south, we get to stomach. There's two really important parts to the stomach. The first is the lining, and the lining is so important because of the second part, the acid. The acid that is in our stomach, first of all, it is supposed to be there. This is a chance for me to bring up something not totally related to digestion, but I probably can never say this enough. A number of natural health people, whether they have a brick and mortar office like we have here, or if they're just an online presence, if they own a supplement company, if they don't, you will often hear that more alkaline is better for you. You'll hear alkalinize, make your body more alkaline all the time. I want you to remember that not all the parts of your body are designed to be alkaline. And the stomach is a perfect example of that. We are supposed to have acid in our stomach. It is supposed to be incredibly potent acid because it's going to break apart food down to a level that's almost difficult to understand. It's not like cutting with a fork and a knife. It's not like putting something in a blender. It's way past both of those. And it's just because the food sits in that liquid acid. So that acid has to be incredibly potent. And that's why making sure the lining of your stomach is healthy. Because if we're going to intentionally hold acid in a part of your body, we have got to have some kind of protective measure. And in this case, it is multiple layers of mucus that the body lines the stomach with so that it is protected from that acid. This is a really wonderful thing. If you've ever heard of somebody having ulcers, or maybe you know somebody who has ulcers, that lining of their stomach has started to break down and the acid is touching the actual wall of the stomach. It's a big no-no. It's incredibly irritating to the body. It damages that tissue very, very aggressively. So we want to nourish up that lining while making sure we have very potent acid. And if we nourish up that lining, there's no problem with having very potent acid. That acid is going to help us break apart our proteins and our minerals. There's really no other part of the body, especially in this north to south process, that can break apart proteins and minerals like the stomach with its acid can. So on the topic of acid blockers, I always like to talk to people about those and make sure we're understanding what's going on with their digestive tract, where they're being recommended to take an acid blocker. I'll tell you, the majority of people that I work with who are already on something like a pantoprazole or omeprazole, Pepcid AC, Tums, Rolaids, so whether it's over the counter or not, they're almost never actually having an acid problem in their stomach. They're usually having a brain problem with their pituitary gland. And what happens is they're throwing food into their body before the body is warmed up and ready for that food to come in. And the stomach panics and goes, oh my goodness, there's food here all of a sudden. It snuck right up on us. Quick, throw a bunch of acid into the stomach. We got to play catch up. And when you're behind on stuff, when your to-do list is too long, you do things that usually make more trouble than they're worth. And in this case, the body makes too much acid because the pituitary was not ready to get going. So we want to digest our proteins and minerals. The only way we can do that is with acid. So we want to make sure that we are signaling the production of acid before we actually start to eat the food. It's one of the most important things you can do to get away from heartburn and from indigestion that hits you in your upper digestive tract. So how do we support it? First, the lining of the stomach. I use a supplement all the time that is called Gastrex. There's another supplement I use that's called Okra Pepsin E3. Yes, okra as in the kind of slimy plant that you can eat. Yes, eating okra is wonderful for the lining of your stomach. To make sure that your stomach is producing high quality acid, I really like a supplement that is called Zypan. And it can also be really helpful if you drink apple cider vinegar, or ACV for short. Some clients even report the process of getting out the bottle of apple cider vinegar, pouring it into a glass, smelling it, and then drinking it. Kind of fires up what's going on in terms of the brain and the mouth, because your brain sees the apple cider vinegar. It learns to associate it with food coming soon. The smell of apple cider vinegar is a very particular smell. So you smell it and you go, oh, yeah, I usually eat food after I smell that. And all those things can help fire up the digestive tract, in addition to supporting the formation of the acid inside the stomach. So we can protect the lining of the stomach, and we can support the formation of good acids. And remember that for some people, the best way to support the formation of acid is actually to make sure that the first step, north to south, is really in a healthy way addressed. That's stomach. Next one we're going to get into is gallbladder. So for those of you that don't know, gallbladder is the Robin to your liver's Batman. They're in cahoots, they're partners in crime. It sits just on the right side of your abdomen, just underneath your rib cage on the right side towards the front. Its most important product is bile. Now, I always like to clarify this for people. There are often questions about this. Your gallbladder doesn't make bile. Your gallbladder is a storage space for bile. It's your liver that makes bile. Liver, just like the pituitary, has a lot of different jobs. One of its jobs requires a liter of water every day just for the creation of it, and that's making bile. So for all of you out there who are like, man, I only get like 20 ounces of water a day, that's not even enough water for one of the organs in your body. Yeah, just keep that in mind. Once the liver gets a chance to make that bile, it sends it over to the gallbladder, and the gallbladder holds it until it gets the signal that foods containing fat are coming through. How does it get that signal? Because we're supposed to taste and smell the fat. And when we chew the food slow enough and for long enough, we absolutely taste it, we absolutely smell it. This sends out a chemical signal to the digestive tract, including the gallbladder, that says it's not long before some fat is going to be passing out of the stomach, and it's going to go right past your gallbladder. And you know what I want you to do? I want you to throw some of your bile right at it, help us break it down, and help us lubricate it, or help us keep it moving. We had the mouth help us with that lubrication thing with the saliva. Once that hits the stomach, that lubrication benefit is gone. The stomach and its acid takes care of that. What's nice is when food leaves the stomach and it hits that bile from the gallbladder next, that picks up the work of supporting the movement. Now, let me give you an idea here. If your mouth doesn't have long enough to help you start to digest the fats, if you chew too fast and you swallow, what happens when those fats get to your gallbladder and the bile is they can't break down as far as they should. It needs your gallbladder with the bile needs a good leg up, needs a good head start on the processing of that. If you think about it, bile is really good at breaking down fats that are about the size of, let's say, a racquetball. But if we don't chew our fats long enough, then that's like asking the gallbladder that prefers a racquetball to digest a volleyball. Well, it's a totally different thing, right? When we chew slow enough and for long enough, it takes those volleyballs and shrinks them down to racquetballs. And that is where the magic of bile from the gallbladder and liver can really be experienced, revealed. So how do we support it? One of the greatest supplements on earth for this is called beta food. It's mostly made out of beets grown in the perfect soil at the standard process farm. Another really good one, especially if you don't have a gallbladder. Let's talk about that for a second. That's called cholesterol. And that's bile salts. So if your body doesn't have a place to store bile, if your gallbladder has been removed for whatever reason, no judgment, we still want to be able to provide bile when the food is starting to get processed. And this is a supplemental way to give bile in the absence of a gallbladder. Earlier, I mentioned choline for the dry mouth. It's also wonderful for the gallbladder. So I'm going to put it down here as well. Then there is what I lovingly refer to as a multivitamin for the liver and gallbladder. It's called Livaplex. It's actually 6 different standard process supplements all blended into one. One of the supplements that's in there is the beta food, but then it also has a number of other supplements that contain a pretty diverse list of nutrients, all of which support the liver and the gallbladder and all of their tasks, including the bile. So for the gallbladder, beta food, cholesterol, choline, Livaplex, those are all really wonderful. But one of the most important things that you can do, whether or not you have supplements, is chew the food long enough so the fats start to break down from volleyballs into racquetballs well before we get to the gallbladder. Now, the next one to go over is pancreas. Okay? Pancreas is often misunderstood. I feel bad for it. It's a pretty incredible organ or gland or both. Do you know this? Let me explain. Your pancreas sits on the left side of your abdomen. If you were to draw a line from the absolute side of your rib cage on the left side, bottom rib, dead center, and connect that spot to your belly button, right along that line is where your pancreas exists. Now, it's very unique because it's neither an organ or a gland, it's both. And the difference is glands have to do with hormones, organs do not. The half of it that is a gland, you've probably heard the term insulin before. That glandular part of the pancreas is responsible for making insulin, which helps us with things like blood sugar, which influences all sorts of stress hormones and inflammation in the body. So it is a big player in inflammation and in stress inside the body. The other half is the organ part, and that's where the body makes enzymes. The easiest way to explain what enzymes are, you've probably heard that term before. But to understand enzymes better, think of the video game Pac-Man. Little yellow thing that goes around chewing stuff up. That's an enzyme. Your body has more than we can count of enzymes going around chewing things up, just like Pac-Man chewed things up. The majority of the enzymes in our body for digestion and the only place that we can produce insulin are both within the pancreas. There's no other part of the body that works in those two very distinctly different camps like that. Your thyroid just does hormones, your adrenals just do hormones, your stomach doesn't really do a lot of hormones, but it does some other jobs. So the pancreas is unique because of the two very different jobs that it primarily does. Now, because of its diversity, we use the term macros. Up here, where'd it go? You see carbs and fats. Here you see protein. Those three together are called the macronutrients. When it comes to the pancreas helps us further the breakdown of all three, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, because of the enzymes that it produces. At this stage in digestion, you remember me talking about fats going from volleyballs down to racquetballs? We're going to take the racquetballs, they've now been reduced to golf balls. We're going to break them down to the size of an almond. So we're going to get much smaller all of a sudden. You know? But again, that is reliant on those previous steps at the mouth, at the gallbladder, all taking place. And then stabilizing blood sugar. Insulin is a hormone, and it has a very important job. It's helping our body have the right amount of sugar in our blood at any point in time. If we have too much sugar in our blood, it can really beat up our blood vessels, the tubes that carry our blood around. If we don't have enough, then we can see that, or hold on, did I say that backwards? If we have too much sugar in our bloodstream, it can beat up the blood vessels. If we don't have enough sugar in our bloodstream, then we often find ourselves getting tired or fatiguing very easily. We want to avoid all of those things. Having the right amount of insulin is one of the ways, probably the most important way that we can do that. So to support the pancreas, there's a supplement that I really like called Diaplex. And it's another combo product. For the most part, with standard processed supplements, I don't know if you've noticed this yet. If it ends in plex, it's most likely a combination of multiple standard processed supplements all put together. Diaplex actually contains beta food. It also contains Zypan, and it also contains pituitrophin. So this is a pretty cool supplement. It's great for the pancreas. It also helps multiple other players in the digestive chain. This is some of the brilliance of Dr. Roy Lee. When he would develop supplements, he was thinking about, look, I want to help this one area of the body, but what is likely to cause stress in that area of the body? And in this case, if the food isn't being broken down at the correct places, that's one of the ways we can cause stress at the pancreas. So Dr. Lee came up with a supplement that said, hey, you know what? Don't worry. We'll just help the whole thing. Another really good supplement for the pancreas is called pancreatrophin, PMG. Big time nourishment, big time anti-inflammation support for the pancreas. Really important. Then our pancreas has a mineral that is extraordinarily important. This mineral is only more important outside of the pancreas in men, and that's zinc. Zinc is really needed for healthy prostate and testicular function. After that, it's pancreas all day, all the way. Totally critical for the sake of the pancreas to have adequate zinc in your life. I like to measure that with a hair tissue mineral analysis. A bunch of you have had those before. That is my favorite way to determine the zinc status of a person in the tissues. And then we have a little liquid test kit here that you swish around your mouth, and based on the taste you get, it tells us acutely about your zinc needs. I like to use that also, but that is going to be more acute, not big picture. So to help the pancreas, there's a couple of different ways. You could also put down an herb called gymnema. And it's not as popular as it used to be because there's a bunch of new kids on the block, so to speak. But gymnema is a wonderful little plant. There's a study I read years ago where the part of the pancreas that produces insulin, they're called beta cells. And it was long believed that once those cells were damaged or offline, that they could never come back and produce insulin. But there was a study years ago where they used gymnema, and they actually found that those beta cells, those insulin producers, came back online after people supplemented with gymnema. Pretty wild. It's nature healing you. Pretty cool. All right, last but not least, we've done brain, mouth, stomach, gallbladder, pancreas. No one has fallen asleep yet. I don't know about at home. You may have fallen asleep at home. But now we're going to talk about intestines. And intestines is absolutely something I could probably do 4 to 6 Thursday midday workshops just on the intestines. So this is a major oversimplification. I just want to focus on the digestion aspects of the intestines. First things first is bacteria. Our intestines have about 2 or 2.5 pounds of bacteria in them at any point in time. It's always funny when I bring that up, there's always somebody who squirms. Now, most of that bacteria is good for you. Maybe I should say that bacteria should be good for you. We want to have a lot of good bacteria. You probably know the term probiotic. That's good bacteria. Fill in our guts. 2 to 2.5 pounds of it. There's a lot of guts down there. If you took your intestines and you unfolded them and laid them flat on a tennis court, you could cover half a tennis court with your intestines. That's how densely packed and how many nooks and crannies and twists and turns there are going on. We want it to be absolutely filled with bacteria because these good bacteria do a couple of things. They help break down the food a little bit further so that we can get every last little bit of nourishment and nutrient out of those foods. They also help our immune system. So if there's something harmful that's inside of our body and has made it past all these different things, the bacteria inside of our intestines are one of the ways our body can actually attack those things and break them down and make it so they can't hurt us. Pretty powerful thing. Now, another defense system that's inside the intestines is the lining of those intestines. Much like the stomach acid lining, it is a protective barrier. Now, in this case, it's not because there's a very high content or potent acid that's present in the intestines, but it's in case there are invaders, different things that would try to harm us that have basically evolved to get through these different things and make it all the way to our intestines. So that lining is very much a shield or a physical barrier between something that would do us harm, certain chemicals, certain metals, certain immune challenges, and our body. So we want to make sure that our intestines are filled with all sorts of good bacteria and that the lining is strong and intact. And the reason for that, it's where our body determines what we keep and what we toss. And that is so important. When a gut gets confused, when food doesn't break down the right way by the time it gets to the gut or to the intestines, and it's overworked or can't really unlock all the nutrients, it's really common to see that there's some degree of confusion about what should be kept in the body and what the body should get rid of. You may have heard of the term leaky gut or maybe auto intoxication. And what happens in this situation, something comes into our body that's no good for us, gets to our bloodstream, our liver grabs it out of the bloodstream and sends it to the intestines for removal. But if the intestines are leaking, if that lining isn't strong, if we don't have enough of those good bacteria, that thing that our liver just tried to get rid of will pass back into our body's bloodstream, where the liver will have to grab it again. And it'll probably take it to the intestines again for removal. But the problem is, if the lining isn't healed, then it's going to sneak out again, go back to the bloodstream. The liver's going to have to grab it a third time. And this pattern repeats and repeats. That's why it's often called auto intoxication, like autobiography. When you write a book about yourself, auto intox is when your body is toxifying itself. We can knock all that off if we help the bacteria and the lining. And there's a couple of ways to do it in terms of support. There are so many different probiotic products out there on the market. There are a lot of good ones. There's even more lousy ones. Okay? Some of my favorites are ProSynbiotic by Standard Process. If you have a history of dealing with fungal issues, mold issues, yeast issues, there's a probiotic called Biofilm Pro Balance. That one is excellent for all things yeast, fungus, mold. For the lining of the intestines, we're going to go back to Gastrix that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the stomach, because it also supports the lining of the intestines, not just the stomach. And then bone broth is far and away the most important food for the health of the intestines. The proteins that are found in bone broth, the minerals that are found in bone broth are critical for making sure that we have good structural integrity. That means the intestines themselves, and then also making sure that the lining is supported. Totally critical. If you can incorporate bone broth into your life on a regular basis, you are doing things for your intestines that you aren't even aware of, but that are totally, totally incredible. So before I check the chat, okay, and I'm still proud of all of you because nobody fell asleep. Before I check the chat, I want to go back over this Cliff Notes style. Digestion is a north to south process. It starts in the brain, not the mouth. You got to get your mind thinking about food, seeing it, smelling it, hearing it cook, something that lights up your brain and says, hey, food's coming soon, let's be ready for it. Then we want the mouth to be ready. We want good, strong teeth. We want a tongue that is sensitive to flavors so that we don't have to add a bunch of sweeteners or artificial flavors to it. And part of the way you do that is by making sure you have good saliva production in the mouth. That saliva production is not just for the sake of the tongue, it's also so we can make sure we're breaking down carbs and fats. Next, your food's going to go to your stomach. We really want to see very potent stomach acid in the stomach, because that's the only way we can truly break down proteins and minerals to the extent that is needed to make sure we have optimal digestion going. But if we're going to have that really potent acid in our stomach, then we're also going to have very strong lining in the stomach. So we want to nourish that and build that up also. After the stomach, it's the gallbladder, and the lubrication support that we get from our saliva is gone. That's one of the benefits of our bile. Helps everything keep moving through our digestive tract. And also for the sake of breaking down fats. Breaking down fats started in the mouth and it continues after the food interacts with the gallbladder. Then we're going to swing past the pancreas on the way down. We're going to get enzymes, that's Pac-Man, help us break up those foods further, and insulin to help us stabilize our blood sugar, get in that sweet spot. Not too much sugar so we hurt ourselves, not so little sugar that we don't have energy, it's that sweet spot. And after the pancreas, it's going further into the intestines where we want the good bacteria, about 2 or 2.5 pounds of it, to help us finally break down the food into what is in one pile to keep it, it's nutrient, it's good for us, and the other pile, toss it, it's waste, get me to a toilet. And we want to support the lining just like the stomach, because that's what's going to protect us against things like leaky gut or auto intoxication. We did it. It's a pretty complex process. There's loads and loads of supplements written up on this board. If you have questions about which ones to use, please do reach out to us. There's a number of ways to get a hold of us. One of the easiest ways is our phone number. It's 262-505-5012. I would never tell someone to take all of these supplements all at the same time. That would be totally overkill and inappropriate. For the most part, when we're talking about digestion, I find that using these combo products like Diaplex and Livaplex is the way to go, because that keeps the total supplement count smaller, but we can still positively influence multiple areas of the digestive tract. Yeah, let me check the chats. Ooh, please explain what actually causes heartburn. I can absolutely do that. We got a bunch of people. I'm going to wave at. Let's check over here on YouTube. IGO recommendations for baby diaper rash. Okay, Cameron, I definitely want to talk about baby diaper rash, but that's going to have to wait for the next Wednesday weekly. So what I'm going to do is put that over here so I don't have to remember it. My board will remember it. All right, I got that notated. Heartburn is the question from the Instagram chat. Good question. So there's a little bit of confusion, or I should say there's people who overlap GERD and acid reflux and heartburn, and they don't know which one they have. They don't understand which one they have, and maybe they have more than one of them. So it can all get a little bit confusing. So what I would like to do is talk more about some of the issues around your stomach acid not performing like it should and not staying where it should. So, in case you didn't know, your stomach, not your stomach like in general, but the actual organ, your stomach, branches off from right under your rib cage, right dead center, and then there's a little pouch that goes off to the left side. And there's an opening at the bottom and at the top. So when you're swallowing food, the top has to open up, boop, so that food can fall in the stomach. And that bottom one better stay closed long enough so that the acid from the stomach can actually have its full beneficial influence on the food that boop fell into the stomach. Once it's time for the food to move on because it's been processed by the stomach, that opening at the bottom of the stomach boop opens up and the food can move on. So it can go past the gallbladder, pancreas, etc. With heartburn, for a lot of people, that top opening, it's like a valve. So sometimes it's closed and sometimes it's open. What happens for a lot of heartburn sufferers is that that valve at the top of the stomach doesn't stay fully closed. There's a little bit of a leak to it. Now, acid can come out of there. The liquid acid can splash up there. Some people notice heartburn or acid reflux when they lay down, and only when they lay down. And it's very likely that it's that valve then that's open a little bit, so there's actually a way for the liquid to splash up. Now, what I have seen clinically is far more common is that the opening at the top of the stomach, that valve, is just barely open, like such a small amount. But even that small amount allows for vapors from the stomach acid to start to leak up, and that'll irritate. Your body wasn't designed to keep acid in your esophagus or in the back of your throat. And those vapors sneak up, and if they're doing that for hours and hours a day, then even though it's an incredibly small amount of vapor, because it has so much time to act on those tissues, it can become incredibly irritating. And it feels like heartburn. So heartburn doesn't always mean that liquid is splashing up. Sometimes it's just vapor is leaking out and heading up and irritating. So I like Gastrex a lot to protect the esophagus. I'm constantly encouraging clients to make sure their brain is turned on before they eat. And often to keep that valve sealed nice and tight, there are certain minerals that are measured on a hair tissue mineral analysis. I'm thinking of manganese in particular. It's really important for the structural integrity of that valve, for that valve's ability to open up when food is passing through, and when it's time to close up for processing, to make sure that it really closes forcefully. Manganese is incredibly important for that. And checking manganese on blood work is an ineffective way to do it. Other things to know about heartburn. I mentioned before when I was talking about stomach that sometimes the issue with the stomach is it didn't get enough signals from the brain before eating started. And then all of a sudden there's food in the stomach and the body starts to throw just incredible amounts of acid at it, saying, quick, we're behind schedule. We'll make up for it. Don't worry. Pour a bunch of acid in there. And the stomach just flat out isn't ready for that kind of volume change between the food and the increase in acid. And what comes of that is that that stuff starts to leak out, or it starts to build pressure, and that valve is either partially open or the pressure forces some leaking vapor, and then again we get those heartburn symptoms. So we can nourish the valves that are at the top and the bottom of the stomach, keep them nice and strong. We can take Gastrex to protect the lining of our esophagus, like when we're dealing with heartburn. We can take things like Zypan or apple cider vinegar to make sure our body is being supported in the production of quality acid instead of having to make a lot of acid. But foundationally, one of the most important things we can do for the sake of getting rid of heartburn is make sure that our brain is fully fired up before we even start eating, so that it's sending out all those signals to the body, hey, food is coming, let's get ready. I know for a fact that some of the best digesting I do in my life is when I grill foods. And that's because I'm there when the foods are being prepared to be taken to the grill. So I'm seeing them, I'm smelling the seasonings getting added to them. I'm there when they're put on the grill so I can smell them cooking, I can hear them sizzling. Um, by the time it's time to eat, I am really interested in that food. And that is because my brain is totally in tune with, hey, there's all this food getting ready. I bet it's going into us. Let's have some food. I hope that answered your question, Lori. I'm going to check the chat again. All right. Does drinking fluids during a meal negatively affect a person's digestion? And during the meal, what about ice water versus cold water versus room temperature? Yeah, we can go over all that good stuff. All right. Let's go over that stuff. So if you have a solution of acid, like in our stomach, and you mix a bunch of water into it, you are diluting that solution. You are making it weaker, less acidic. So a lot of water during a meal can negatively influence digestion. It will water down that acid and make it less potent. The other thing that can mess with it is our stomach is a finite amount of space. It has a limit. And it can stretch a little bit. We really don't want to test that too hard. Um, it can stretch, but water takes up a lot of volume uh, inside the stomach. So in some of the books I read in school, they said that 4 ounces of fluid was the max that you should have during a meal, including the half an hour before and the half an hour after, to make sure that we have really high potency. Um, that can be kind of tricky to do, especially if you're having spicy food, right? I have found it easier to decrease my fluid intake at meals as I have done a better job of getting plenty of fluids outside of meals. If my body is well hydrated in general, I find I don't need as much hydration during an actual meal. Now, the second question was about warm water versus room temp versus cold versus ice water. And the inside of our stomach is warmer than when we take our temperature. So if you check a temperature under your tongue or in your armpits or rectally, none of those areas are as hot as your stomach. And it's simply because your stomach has more insulation. There's more tissues all around your stomach. There's more things creating heat all around your stomach compared to under your tongue. This has about an inch of tissue between here and the underside of my tongue where I can take temperature. When you get into the stomach, there's at least 2 or 3 inches of tissue on all the sides of it, um, keeping it warmer than 98.6 degrees. So it's recommended when you're drinking something, just in general, but especially around meals, that it be warm or at least room temperature. Drinking things that are cold or that have ice in them while you're eating can really shake up that biome, that balance within the stomach itself, and disrupt some of its functioning. And just think of it this way: if you're walking around on a warm day and the sun is shining and your outfit is on point and your hair is just right, and then somebody dumped ice water on you, you're probably not going to feel the same way as you did just a minute before. And it's just like that for your stomach. Your stomach does not like getting a bucket of ice water dumped over it. Huh? Good question. I'm going to check one more time if there's other questions. Otherwise, looks like a few people need a refill on a Spindrift. Still got people joining. I love that. All right, Laura, I see that question coming through. I like the first way you asked it. Everybody on Instagram, check out that question. It is, how important is it for Ron nuts to be sprouted? And do walnuts need to be sprouted? All right, I'm going to wrap up the workshop on this question. When it comes to the topic of different types of nuts, almonds, cashews, Brazil nuts, etc., one of the best things you can do to support the digestion of those foods is to soak or sprout them. Soaking those different nuts and seeds, what it does is it helps break up or kind of pre-digest the most difficult parts of those foods to eat and digest. You can do it by just buying something like raw almonds, for example. Fill up a mason jar with them, and then pour some salt water over the top of them. Leave them sit like that overnight, and then in the morning, pour off the water, rinse them thoroughly, and then bake them or dehydrate them so they have that crunchy, crispy thing again. Just that process of soaking them in water overnight makes it much easier for us to unlock the nutrients from different nuts and seeds. What I say, it's absolutely critical and the most important thing to do. So for a lot of my clients, they come in and the snacks that they're eating, for lack of a better term, are just rubbish. It's vending machine stuff. It is all carb, no protein, no fat. That's all like real processed, refined carb. So if somebody's going to switch over from having a Rice Krispie treat to some raw almonds, we're making huge gains. So I don't want to harp on that person. If you want to perfect those almonds, then we get into the soaking and the sprouting. But please hear me when I say that no matter how much, better is still better. So if you're switching from something junky over to nuts and seeds, and now you're starting to hear about soaking and sprouting, and you're going, oh, I don't soak and sprout my nuts and seeds, so might as well stop doing them. Well, time out. Hit the pause button on that one. If you're doing better, then you're doing better. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there for today. This was a good first Thursday midday. Still working on the title. Do you guys like Thursday midday? Yeah, you don't care? Okay, cool. I like alliteration, so the Wednesday weekly workshops, that really works for me. So here's what you need to know. The video from today with all this info will be posted. It'll stay up online. 10 days from now on Saturday, we're doing another workshop here. I strongly recommend that you come in and be in person for that one, as we are going to be doing some sampling of some different things that are coming down the pipeline from Standard Process. And the only way I can give you samples is if you are physically here. I recommend reserving a seat, but it's not required. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, for asking questions. Cameron, I won't forget about you. I want to thank everybody who showed up in person. It was before COVID started, was the last time that we did a workshop where we had people actually show up in person. And boy, I've missed it. So it's good to be back. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. You'll see me soon, whatever platform it is on. But look forward to next Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock for our Ask Drew Anything. And then the Saturday after that for another one of these pre-planned workshops. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you soon.